Жизнь – это череда вызовов.
Life is a constellation of challenges. In order to be ahead, you need to predict a few steps ahead.
Вместе,
Altogether,
диалоги,
we can build a dialogue.
вот эти вызовы.
We can use these challenges and change the future.
Сегодня настало
Today
изменить
is the day to change our orientation
санкции и политические.
and together come from
Заинтересован
sanctions to business, because the business is interested in moving forward.
будет изменить
Business versus sanctions is the point where cultural and economical flows intersect.
именно здесь формируется
And they intersect in Ufa. It is a space for an open dialogue.
время сказать
It's time
важно.
to talk about the most important things for the sake of the future of Earth.
All right, greetings everyone. Before I begin, don't be afraid hearing me speak in English. We have a simultaneous translation for everyone. Channel 1 is Russian, Channel 2 is English, and Channel 3 is Turkish. И на всякий случай я скажу на русском.
And just in case, let me repeat in Russian. We have a stream online, and you can opt for simultaneous interpretation. Channel 1 is Russian, Channel 2 is English, Channel 3 is Turkish. And let me speak in my native language.
I'm an American-born Russian citizen. I've worked in the media in Moscow, from journalism to political analysis to the radio to even creating a few reality shows, or at least trying to. So I've done everything related to the media and to an extent to politics. I'm also an offensive lineman for one of the teams in the Russian League of American Football. But that's a story for another day. My co-moderator with me today is a man who needs no introduction, although I will provide one. He is a man who definitely knows far more about the economic ramifications of sanctions than I do. He is the Prime Minister of Bashkortostan, Andrei Nazarov. Thank you very much for being with us today. Now, one thing I do want to warn everyone about is we're having one very special guest who is definitely a very busy woman, and we may have to kind of slide her in when she gets the moment to appear. She'll be on the big screen. So if someone gets cut off during their presentation, I beg forgiveness in advance. Sometimes we can't plan everything perfectly. But anyways, so what are we doing here today? We have gathered people from 23 nations from all of the continents across the globe, excluding Antarctica, of course, to come here to talk about this issue, to create a dialogue about these sanctions. Sort of a continuation of some of the video footage you saw there of the April event in Moscow of the forum, Economy versus Sanctions. Now we're continuing, now we're opening the dialogue, because at that forum, so many people were excited that they wanted to participate, that's what's sort of led us here today. And speaking of today, yesterday, the main topic of the business week that we're here to enjoy in Ufa was on the technological side. However, today, we are talking about the development and growing partnership and interaction between members of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And to tell us a little bit about that and give us some warm words to start our dialogue with, we have the SCO General Secretary, John Min, is going to be on the screen. Could we please load up his greeting right now?
尊敬的各位代表，女士们、先生们，大家好。
Dear representatives
巴什科尔托斯坦
of the session, today, first of all, I want
委员会秘书处
to express my gratitude
出席
to the
活动，表示
organization
上合组织与
of this
密切的联系。
forum. I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers, to the government of the Republic of Bashkortostan and Russian Federation.
国家元首理事会会议就在无法举。
And SCO is the cooperation not only in terms of business. Recently, we had a meeting of heads of states of SCO.
同一年，俄罗斯
And this meeting
一个地方合作机制的
adopted a key document for our
上合组织
organization. This meeting was held in 2015.
19年在比什凯克通过的
It's very important
合作发展
that we are launching our cooperation
内相关合作的
and we are establishing new frameworks for regions.
在上合组织至2025年发展战略中落实跨境
We are going to use the key principles
被
of SCO while building this cooperation.
今年分别在
We are going to define the key points of our cooperation,
总理会
and these points will be defined under meetings of the heads of states and responsible authorities.
各位代表
I'm glad to see that many of the states
建立
are eager to continue our cooperation and are eager to support our key points.
有必要有效利用上合组织
To my mind, such kind of cooperation is key for
本组织的互联。
development of economic relations and the global situation in the world.
在今年9月，
Unfortunately, the reality sometimes imposes challenges.
成员国发展
In September this year, we held a meeting,
高效交
we held a summit,
构想，
and it adopted the concept of building the common logistics network.
合作的重要领域。
This network will help us establish the scenario of development.
产生了消极影响。对此，成员国在2010年上合组织成员国政府
We draw our attention to the directions of logistic chains.
在农业科技和创新成果交流、制定和实施联合投资
We know that today we have challenges that prevent us from introducing innovative
及其他领域开展了
technologies and maintain the current
萨马尔罕峰会
supply chains.
和组织成员国授权
This year in Samarkand,
关于植物检疫
SCO held
协定和
a meeting
和组织
and
智慧农业。
signed a final agreement about the further cooperation.
旅游业在地方合作的发展中发挥着重要作用。
We also included agriculture into this agreement.
通过专门机制，在这一领域开展合作。
I see that SCO members
那么今年9月，
view agriculture
萨马尔罕签署
as a foundational aspect of economy.
2020年呢，上合组织通过了上合组织旅游和文化之都条例。我们相信
Back in 2000,
落实
in 2020,
与改善各国的经济状
a
况，
tourist
创造新的，
provision
特别是
was adopted as part of SCO. We also think that the adoption of this document allows to improve economic relations,
投资
especially in SME
是
sector.
的文化传统，
The market expands
各国之间的
to sell domestic products, and
世界家委员会
it promotes a bridge, cultural and economic bridge between the countries,
合作方面发挥
between the nations. Trade and economic sphere is also very important.
示范区，
Tourism promotes that.
组织杨林
It's very important to say that we already have some implemented projects between the zones
合作，
which allow to
者的共同
establish a basis for exchange and research. I'm sure that thanks to our cooperation, our mutual cooperation, we will have an opportunity to strengthen, to solidify regional economies, and will allow to
谢谢各位。
develop at a general pace. Thank you very much, dear speaker.
For those warm words. Now, let's put things into context as to why we're all here. That's always a good first step. So, anyways, Mr. Nazarov, could you tell us how Russia's regions have been dealing with this nearly a year's worth of sanctions, and especially your region, which seems to be faring extremely well? So could you give us sort of the bigger picture of this, and also perhaps answer the question, why is this dialogue that we're having today the UFA, or UFA dialogue?
Thank you, Tim, for helping us, for assisting us with the discussion, with the talk. Dear participants, I would like to remind you that on April 24th, 2022, in Moscow, a meeting was held between foreign and Russian domestic private entrepreneurs, where a deputy of European Parliament, co-founder of Russian-French Dialogue, Thierry Mariani, offered to establish a discussion framework, and we offered our own UFA infrastructure to hold the meetings of this kind and events. That's why the discussion was given the name of UFA Dialogue, and this initiative was supported by many of our Russian public and political institutions, in particular a Committee of State Duma for Economic Policy, Federal Center for Strategic Developments, a number of other public and political associations. And today, as a continuation of the discussion of that initiative that we took, we're holding this event today. As Tim already said, as a result of this meeting, I received, as a follow-up, I received a letter from Mr. Mariani to head together this discussion framework called UFA Dialogue, and to hold the first meeting. That's why we made a decision to hold it as part of the International Business Week in Ufa, so that all the participants could have an opportunity to contact other members of the International Week, and additionally, the efficiency of the time spent. I think we can use this time more efficiently. Regarding your question, how the situation unfolds, how the situation develops in Russia and Bashkortostan in particular, amid sanctions, I would like to remind you that in general, against Russia nowadays, as of now, there are 13,000 sanctions imposed. More than 10,000 of those were imposed this year, in 2022. That's why we are, in a sense, record setters, and we're ahead of Iran in terms of sanctions 3 times, Syria 5 times. We have moved ahead of those countries quite quickly, while the sanctions against those countries were imposed gradually, year after year. Well, probably those who initiated sanctions, they were planning that they wanted to collapse the Russian economy, to collapse and have some negative aftermath, negative results. But the president of Russia mentioned that that didn't happen. They didn't succeed. The idea was a failure. And the strategy of economy blitzkrieg against the economy of Russia didn't happen. So today, we need to accept it as something obvious, that sanctions didn't influence the stability of Russian financial system, didn't influence macroeconomic stability. We learned to overcome, irrespective of the situation. And I need to mention that Russian budget today, the income of the budget added, has grown by 10% and reached 23 trillion rubles. Well, if we take Bashkortostan as an example, our own income has increased by 18%. The relations with many countries, between Bashkortostan and many countries, we continue that, we sustain that. 113 countries. In 9 months alone, we have confirmed statistics. The trade has increased by 13.5%. Several dozens of largest countries, our counterparts, they are China, Kazakhstan, Latvia, Netherlands, Turkey, Belarus, India, Finland, Germany, Finland, Uzbekistan. About 70% of our foreign trade falls to the given countries which I've just mentioned. As you can see, there are European countries in the list also who remain our partners irrespective. And we see that without our chemical industry, many countries cannot go by, they cannot cope without Netherlands, for example, they cannot cope without chemicals. Latvia, Germany, without equipment and machinery, Latvia, India, they cannot cope without our products of this kind. So we have to interact, we have to cooperate with the leaders of those countries. We continue investing, we have a large number of investment projects with investors from other countries. More than 10 countries are our partners in terms of projects implemented on the territory of Bashkortostan. We keep looking for new solutions, new decisions, because this situation is not something that we follow to decrease our activeness. It's an additional impulse. We're not pessimistic. We're finding new niches. We're trying to streamline cooperation between the Russian regions more. We have more opportunities. We are now establishing the Eurasian Economic Center, which will be in Bashkortostan, which is at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. It's the uniting point for 6 neighboring regions of Russia to create an Eurasian Economic Center. By doing so, we unite our links, chains into cooperation, and we get additional synergy effect, both in terms of attracting investment and production. We have also addressed the federal government with the initiative to establish in Bashkortostan a special administrating area based on Islamic legislation. This kind of regime will help us to establish comfortable and attractive environment for investors from Islamic countries, Islamic capital as we call it. And we're trying to attract assets, state-of-the-art advanced technologies from Islamic countries, which will give additional impulse again to us and investors from the given countries and to our partners. We, in the given situation, in the current situation, we set a number of priorities to mitigate the aftermath of foreign trade, and we try to support our industry, different branches, import substitution, decapitalize the regional fund of regional development. We are making up clusters already now. For the first time in Russia, we established furniture cluster, aviation cluster. And so all of our efforts are justified. The index of industrial production was equal to 102.8%. We have been keeping the second place in terms of production in Russia. For example, our Bashneft oil company implements 7 projects worth of 64 billion rubles. Belzan, usual oil, Avtodetal, Ural Spring plant. They are already manufacturing components which substitute foreign analogs for our car-making industry. So we can go by, we can manage with our domestic products, in particular the areas which I've mentioned, manufactured in Bashkortostan. Agriculture. Here, we completely satisfy all the domestic needs, and also we manufacture much more than necessary. That's why we export to abroad and to other regions of Russian Federation. We have 5 million crops harvest, which is a record. Last time we achieved it was 30 years ago. Agricultural products increased by 25%. 63 investment projects implemented in the sphere of agriculture. We manufacture more than 150 items of agricultural equipment serially, commercially, and making sure that our agricultural sector does not depend on the foreign-made European equipment, using domestic analogs. Also, we reappraised, re-estimated revisited our domestic resources, trying to understand how to cope without exported foreign-made components. We try to make Bashkortostan the best region to live in Russia. That's our paramount goal, and we follow this. We are trying to attain this goal, working hard. Sanctions doesn't matter. We see growth. We're We are following the same pace. No doubts we are going to achieve the result in the forthcoming years, and we hope this will be an additional confirmation that Bashkortostan and Russian Federation in general can cope with their own resources, domestic resources, but I think it doesn't make any sense working on domestic-made resources only. To wrap up, I would like to say we have an agreement with Mr. Mariani. We have some plans for regarding our discussion framework called UFA Dialogue. Our next meeting will be dedicated to the first introduction of first package of sanctions against Russia, which happened in the beginning of spring 2022. And so accordingly, the next meeting will be held at this moment. We're doing some expertise. We're trying to assess damage which the business and the economy of the countries have imposed. Those countries which imposed sanctions on Russia, they had damage, and we're trying to assess it. Some economic aftermath, economic damage, making it public, known to the planet, to the international audience. And so the second meeting of UFA Dialogue will be arranged around discussing those figures. So as a follow-up of our second meeting, based on the discussion, we will address the European Parliament to change the sanction policy. We will demonstrate vividly the damage with which the situation actually led. Also, we would like to have the Business Association of Compatriots from Russia, people born in Russia but living abroad, so that business people could move the process forward, lifting those artificial barriers created by politicians. So today, the two QR codes you can see on the screen now, those of you willing, please scan and join our business association. And so you could use this time. So dear colleagues, this is our mood. Thank you very much for participating. Personally, thank you for those who will join remotely. Team, thank you very much. It's not the first time we meet at various discussion frameworks. Thank you very much for joining our UFA Dialogue. Let's continue our discussion.
All right, then thank you very much. So our first topic is going to be a little bit related to my background in the media. And as someone who works in the media, I know that very often the media can reflect reality. But very often it also likes to reflect the reality that certain people that finance the media want us to see. So when we look at Europe after all these sanctions, I've seen through certain media sources this picture that people are cold this winter, that industries are being shut down, especially in Germany, and especially in the Netherlands. The farmers there are suffering like at no point in the history of that nation. But on the other hand, right now, an entire 9th round of sanctions against Russia are being gathered together by EU politicians who seem to feel quite proud of themselves for doing it. So the question is, what is the actual mood in the EU? What's sort of happening here? Are these sanctions, is the attitude towards sanctioning Russia going to change at any point in the near future?
Hello? Hello.
And
Hello.
also, I guess to handle that then question, we're going to jump over to Miroslav Radachovsky. Sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Yes.
My apologies. Miroslav, are you with us?
Yes. Привет
Hello
из Страсбурга.
from Strasbourg.
Друзьям по всему миру.
Hello, dear friends from all over the world. Hello to my Russian friends.
Друзья в Башкортостане.
Hello, my friends in Bashkortostan.
Могу принять участие на
I'm glad that I can take part in this event.
Я член
As far as you know,
парламента,
I am a European MP,
делегации
and I am a member of the delegation of European Parliament in terms of cooperation with Russia.
парламента европейского. Я евродепутат из Словакии.
Being a European MP, I originate from Slovakia. Despite of the situation in Ukraine,
нужно, чтобы умные люди всего мира,
important to smart people from all over the world
депутаты,
and smart European
умные русские
parliament members and smart Russians
сотрудничали
to
на
cooperate
экономической платформе,
in the economic aspect,
в культуре,
to cooperate in the cultural aspect,
так, чтобы не было нужно
to
санкций.
cooperate without any sanctions needed.
Сказал уже, не помню, что
Somebody of you said
такое настроение, что
that in the European Parliament the
евродепутаты
situation is
поддерживают санкции.
a little vague because a lot of parliament members support sanctions and they are proud of sanctions. But I must say that not all members are like that because sanctions affect
на Штаты,
the states,
на
the
Штаты
European Union,
Востока,
and the states
между такими
and the Oriental countries.
есть и Словакия. На Словакии
It affects
есть много людей, которые
Slovakia.
поддерживают
In Slovakia, there are a lot of people who don't support sanctions
плохие для
because sanctions negatively affect
уровня жизни
the living standards of the Slovakian people.
и так дальше, и так далее.
They cause the increased
Я не знаю,
rates
что я бы
for energy.
сказал, потому что я
I don't know what
не было
to
времени
say
приготовиться на
because unfortunately I didn't have enough time to get ready to the event.
Могу сказать, что я
But
очень рад.
I want to openly say that I am glad that such events exist.
Я думаю, что нужно
I'm glad that it's important to hold this kind of events
сотрудничество
because we need to maintain this cooperation.
Европе Востока.
It's important for Europe, it's important for
Мое мнение.
Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and Oriental states. The situation is complicated.
И кажется, когда-нибудь такая
It seems
идеологическая,
to be filled with ideological misinformation.
что это уже все
And
прошло.
it seems
Теперь нет.
I used to think that
Теперь есть.
it's
Я
all
думаю, что
history,
не будет.
but now I face this kind of situation again, and that's frustrating.
У меня не
What do I
хватает,
say?
не хватает времени, потому что я нужно
I'm running out of time.
идти
I have to be elsewhere.
работать и
I have work to do.
голосовать в
I have to vote in the parliament.
что я могу.
But I'm glad to be able to participate in this event.
Что в будущем, когда будет
I hope
больше
that in the future I will have more time to get ready, to prepare,
больше.
and I will tell you more.
Здесь мой сын.
Here I have my son next to me.
Здравствуйте.
Hello.
Здравствуйте. Молодой человек,
He is a young man.
будущее Европы.
He is the future of Europe, and the future of Europe depends on young people.
Скажет что-нибудь он.
Maybe he will say something.
Извините, что мой русский.
I apologize for my Russian.
Я хочу
It's not the
по-русски. Почему хочу
perfect,
говорить
but I want to speak Russian.
Я
Why? Because when I speak Russian,
на русском канале, я думаю, что надо говорить русский. Пока на
when I'm speaking to Russians, I want to speak Russian.
дальше.
And when I speak to another nation, I would like to speak their national language. When I refer to
Не буду.
the Chinese people, I would like to speak Chinese, even though I don't know Chinese.
Привет вам большой
So I'm saying hello again. I'm saying my
за то, что я
greetings to you.
участвовал в этого мероприятия.
Thank you again for having me here. Thank you, dear friends.
Господин Радачевский,
Dear
спасибо,
Mr. Radachevsky, thank you very much for sparing your time.
что присоединились к нашей
Thank you for joining the discussion. I would like to ask you one question.
теме. Европейских
Once the European sanctions are imposed on Russia,
после того, как стало понятно, что
and after it got clear that are not as effective as the European Parliament expected to,
для Евросоюза, меняется ли сегодня настроение
does the situation change
лидеров
accordingly? Does the situation with the leaders change? Because the Hungarian attitude is different from all the others.
в Европарламенте?
Being within the European Parliament, do you think anything changed?
Что се сменило? Но есть и другие страны.
There are different countries.
Надо сказать, что
I have to say
правительства
that
стран и разница между
the situation is different in different governments, in different countries, and in different populations of these countries. For example, Slovakia has a democratic government, but this government,
Это правительство, ну, скажу ровно, прямо, это
let me put it straight,
санкции. Но множество
it's a
и оппозиция,
charter,
и оппозиция, они говорят, что это не надо.
and the opposition is against the sanctions.
Не всегда то, что говорит
Not always what the government says is what is happening in the country.
и
I guess you get what I'm saying.
пока относиться к депутатам Европейского парламента, я думаю, что
And speaking about the European Parliament, it depends.
думают логически, не
I guess they
понимают.
are not always capable of thinking logically, and sometimes they have
Но это факт.
a negative attitude.
И что
But
делать? Надо
the
работать.
fact, the reality is that we have to keep cooperating.
Такое мероприятие,
We have to keep events
это
like this. We have to hold events like this.
работать.
We don't need to cry, we don't need to get frustrated, we just need to face the challenges.
И мы,
People like me
друзья, мы будем
and my followers will support
мероприятия, будем продолжать.
this kind of events, this kind of dialogues.
Больше вам сказать не знаю.
What do I say?
Ситуация. Лучше было бы говорить
Of course, I would be happy to speak to you in person.
из другого места, как с...
I would like to be somewhere else,
Потому что ситуация
not in the European Parliament, because the situation is frustrating.
и так дальше, и так дальше. Здесь существует шпиономания и так дальше, и так дальше.
There are different approaches
С
to
которым
this situation, and
место для
being in the place I am now is not necessarily my favorite.
хочу.
That's what I want to say.
Thank you very much for being with us. Now, Mr. Nazarov, we just talked about Europe and unfortunately some of the lack of flexibility that we can find in Europe. However, there's a whole rest of the world, and besides the West, the rest of the world seems willing to work with Russia, even despite the possible blowback from not observing certain sanctions put into place by Washington or Brussels. So the question is, what about South America, Africa, or maybe even most importantly, what about Asia? How have they been working with Russia through this period of extreme sanctions?
Да, Тим, спасибо.
Tim, thank you. Yes, I would like to continue your thought.
Действует таким образом.
European Union has been acting the way they act. There is a saying, I think it's well understood,
Выстрелили себе в ногу.
shooting in your own leg.
Смотрел, мне вчера прислали
Yesterday, I received from Italy a photo of the cost of firewood.
15 килограмм дров,
15 kilograms of firewood costs in a store
целых 9 евро. То есть
6.9, almost 7 euros.
евро стоит 15
7 euros they charge for 15 kilograms
килограмм дров.
of firewood.
Exactly. That's pretty brutal. Wow.
Поэтому, а зачем, да? Зачем?
Why?
Были хорошие отношения.
We had very good relations. We could ship what we have a lot in abundance. We could consume what Europe manufactures, moving economies of our countries forward. So, to satisfy some political tasks, wishes,
Даже больше, чем наши.
and this has already become the problem of European Union, not of Russia.
Было еще одним.
Asia has always been for us a center of interest. I think you remember
Видите, двуглавый
in our coat of arms of Russia, you can see a double-headed eagle looking in two directions, east and west, and we have
видим, что очень
been intensifying this work. We have seen a lot of points of contact with Asia.
за счет того направления.
The trade grows thanks to Asia.
Здесь как раз
Today we have together personally the executive
организация
secretary of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Sergei Kanavsky, who is
ШОС видит взаимодействие.
he is inside SCO. He sees this cooperation. He sees the trade exchange with SCO countries. Sergei,
Ваши наблюдения.
please share your observations. Andrei, thank you so much. Thank you, team, as well, for giving me the floor. I will speak Russian if you don't mind, because as part of SCO we have two official languages, Russian and Chinese. Well, I'm thankful to the Secretary General of SCO, to the Forum Administration, to focusing on the problem. Thank you to Bashkortostan for inviting. Yes, not just some kind of countermeasure. We see that SCO is an international framework institution where we have 8 member countries and 13 countries members of SCO dialogue. They follow the agreements reached. If something was agreed upon, nobody exits some international contracts. Number 2 is that this is the organization where every voice is heard. It has become quite an attractive organization to join for the rest of the countries, because as observers, as partners in dialogue, many countries from Asian and Pacific region, Middle East, and probably maybe in future, in the near future, countries of Asia and Latin America may also join in, because in SCO, questions, issues are discussed at various levels, at the level of heads of governments, business leaders, ministries. A friend from SCO, a spirit of SCO, is something that allows us to reach harmonious bilateral. We don't segregate people into old ones and new ones, black, white, I don't know, various level. We don't discriminate based on income or anything. It's universal for anyone. Well, countries, members have various potential. I think you can understand we have China and we have Nepal, who are partners. This is unfortunately incomparable in terms of their economy potential. But anyways, Nepal is allowed to participate, is invited on equal terms, and the heads of the states at the summits, which was held in Samarkand in September 22, they quite distinctly stated the parameters of cooperation. Yes, food safety, investment safety, technology cooperation in IT, new technologies, digitalization. And it's interesting for everyone. Small countries, medium-sized countries, big countries, and Russia is as a link in a chain. Russia is attractive for everyone, for all the SCO members. Irrespective of the situation we have with Europe, we see, Andrei, that the interest of the East, Central Asia, Middle East, it has grown recently. We receive delegations, we discuss projects. Today, you've mentioned some of them at our event. Many people mentioned that business should find its own way. It's impossible for business not to develop. It's impossible to hide in some corner, be frightened, be terrified with some hard-to-understand events, measures which don't promote friendship and cooperation and equal work in terms of economy. Yes, we see growth, we see increase. We receive a lot of cooperation offers. Market is market. If someone leaves the market, the niche, the empty space is very quickly occupied by someone else, by some other structures and institutions. It might be painful, yes, some past partners, future partners. That's what the SCO is for. That's what it's meant for. And now we're talking about, in terms of business, economy, cooperation, shouldn't be based on instant profit.
якобы хороший, интересный результат, который
If you see some task which is easily attainable, but in the long run it may lead to some negative consequences. So your mindset, it should be based on the history of your relations. We should invite businessmen who want fair
тотальной зависимости.
relations, should not be dependence, total dependency on some mood, instant mood.
Старый, уважаемый.
Yes, there are some old and distinguished members, countries of the world. But if in the given situation, business companies from
Юга.
old countries or Southeast, Middle East, if they have more interest with Russia,
Мы, конечно,
we should pay attention.
эфемерных
We will not, discriminate them.
или возможных
We will not give priority to our old partners, irrespective
сейчас с нами не
of the history. If they don't want to communicate now, if they don't want to cooperate now, that's okay. We will try to look someone in Asia. Yes, it's not easy.
новым,
It requires new
в частности,
paths.
использованного потенциала
For example, transit potential of SCO.
в другую сторону.
SCO actually turned in a different direction.
Это работа,
But
которую все хотят,
this is work
хотят
which everyone wants to do,
именно сопоставлять с
compare, match with the needs we have,
в том числе
the countries who are manufacturers of, who are producers of energy, machines,
что проблемы,
equipment.
мы сегодня тоже говорили о том, что
I'm sure that
если они есть, то мы сейчас вместе со странами
if there are problems, if there are challenges, together with China, India, Middle East, South Asia, we're trying to find some cooperation
позволяет
opportunities, which on the one hand help the countries to
непонятным
cooperate, which for
учитывать
countries which are under some vague and strange sanctions, we try to embrace the interests of business, making sure that they're not involved in some strange political games. So
ШОС как раз
SCO, in this sense, is an institution which helps to develop trade and economic relations in any situation. You are kindly invited to participate. Everyone is invited. Africa, Latin America, Asia.
двери для
The doors are open for cooperation. The doors are open for everyone. Yes, the situation is not
китайские
easy. But everything changes. As Chinese people say,
шагов начинается с
a road of 10,000 steps starts with the first step. I'm suggesting to make that first step. The question is, who will make this first step?
Oh, thank you very much. Let's hope that this level of optimism that we have for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization can continue to develop, because it's definitely something that for many years has given people, especially in Russia, a lot of hope. And something else that's been happening for many years is a gradual sort of, how can I call it? I think the term is pivot to Asia. We've, excuse me, I've seen many maps for many years that sort of show the economic center of the world. And every 5 years or so, it keeps shifting more and more to the east, more and more towards China, South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and so on. So, Mr. Nazarov, what do you think about this in the context of this pivot to Asia? How have, say, Russia's exporters, be they more smaller independent companies or bigger businesses, how have they dealt with this sort of enforced pivot to Asia due to sanctions?
Тим, я бы хотел сказать о том, что, наверное, всегда
I would like to say
регион
that we have always been cooperating with Oriental countries.
об укреплении,
Today, we are talking about strengthening these connections.
что большой потенциал
We see a huge potential behind these states, and it's even bigger than we used to use and we used to see.
когда называют термин, что происходит разворот.
When I hear that the economy is turning towards Asia, I wouldn't support this saying, because we were never close to
видим сейчас, что
Oriental states, and we have always seen the potential, and we are gladly using the connection that we have already built, and we are developing the points of interaction. I would like to give the floor to Artur Leyer, Vice President of Association of Importers and Exporters, who will describe the current economic situation. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the floor. Mr. Nazarov, thank you, Mr. Kirby, for the question. Currently, I know that the share of export so far exceeds the share of import. As it has been mentioned earlier, the sanctions were meant to disrupt the economy, but indeed it did just the opposite. Because we strengthened our cooperation with CIS countries, we didn't turn around, we just strengthened the cooperation with Oriental states and enhanced the turnover of goods. We enhanced the turnover of goods with Iran, Turkey, Mongolia. In Mongolia, we raised the turnover by 47%. The reason is that the part of goods cannot be exported by the governmental orders. Despite of that, we still see the clear growth of export. Speaking about the export amounts in money calculations, it has risen by 5% in comparison to the previous period. It's important to say that part of the industry has been affected because it was oriented on non-friendly countries. These industries are metallurgy, wood processing, and forest industry. Despite of that, we see a stable growth. At the governmental level, it's important to keep working on a number of goods in order to reduce the customs cost, because a number of states have a very high import duties. We need to work on that. This will stimulate export even more and give it an additional momentum. I would like to say that in the last year, the agricultural complex rose, and Russia became the key supplier of fertilizers to India. So we see that relations with other countries are growing. We had them beforehand, and now we are making them even stronger. Besides, the import substitution mechanism has to stimulate the economy, and it will lead to the growing export of this kind of product. Mr. Nazarov, thank you for giving me the floor. We see it clear that the economy is growing. We see this situation and tendency in Ufa and Bashkortostan and overall Russian Federation. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Now, Mr. Nazarov, another question about out east. How do the Chinese, how are they seeing this change in Russia? Because, you know, as an American, what we saw when Nixon went to China, what did he do? He basically made an agreement with the Chinese, that they sort of became America's factory, where American workers tended to have very high salaries, high disposable incomes, and those went to a lot of Chinese products. And so there was sort of this interdependency between China and America, which is now starting to be broken up, especially by people like Trump. But perhaps now that China sees Russia rising, changing, fighting the West themselves, them also being a bit forced out of the game they were used to, perhaps they see Russia as a potential competitor. Do you think that there's any chance of that being the case?
I see that China has always been our reliable partner. Therefore, I am convinced there is no competition, no apprehension that we can be competitors. We combine our advantages, we fill in their needs, fulfill their needs. As I see, Bashkortostan sees the Chinese Republic as the key partner.
взаимовыгодное, оно строится
We think that
в
this
основе, поэтому
cooperation is mutually beneficial. Therefore, I am convinced that this will go on like this.
понять позицию самого Китая,
To understand the Chinese
высказаться
point of view, I would like to give the floor to the head of the representative office of the
торговли,
Committee for Promotion of the International Trade,
Гао Ци.
Gao Zi.
尊敬的 Andrei Gennadievich，各位参会嘉宾，大家下午好。非常高兴，也非常荣幸能够代表
Dear participants, I'm very happy
委员会来参加
to be here and represent
乌法国际商务论坛和与会的
the China Council for Promotion of the International Trade.
如何在新的国际政治经济形势下发展中国与俄罗斯之间
I am happy to be a part of this economic dialogue in Ufa.
共和国之间的经济合作。
I'm very happy to be a part of this discussion.
所见到的当前
I am glad
经济格局
to be a part of the economic cooperation between Russia and China,
很多变化
and Bashkortostan in particular.
性的也会是结构性的，但是尽管
In the current situation, a lot of things change, and the structure of the economy changes,
贸合作
and it's complicated.
好的发展势，
The situation
我想这首先得益于
of international relations is complicated and changing.
良好的政治关系，
I am glad that Russia and China keep maintaining and strengthening the relations between these states.
正在进入
And I am glad that the heads of the states
我们两国
reached an agreement and signed a
包括经贸
relevant contract.
各领域合作的坚实的基础。
It shows that
中俄
Russia and China have a strong basis in every aspect of life.
具有很强的互补性，
The Chinese Republic of China
优势
and the Russian Federation
建设还是在
have
自然
economies that
方面这是互有优势、互为互补，
Add-ups.
为中俄
that give each other their advantages.
提供了强大的韧性和空间。
So this cooperation is mutually beneficial, and
官的统计，在今年的
it gives a space, a room for them to move
两国的双
around.
贸易额达到了1724.0%，
This year, before November 2022,
32%。
the turnover between China and Russia reached
将超过1800亿，
some really high figures.
确立的到2024年是
And I guess the peak is to be overcome by the end of the year.
一个令人欣慰和高兴的
I think we are going to reach
两国
a record-breaking 200 billion.
国际形势下，尽管面临对着美国和西方对于俄罗斯
I believe that despite of the complicated
两国的经贸，
geopolitical situation and sanctions,
同时我也想请大家
we will be able
自今年
to keep our relations running. I would like to draw your attention to the fact
俄罗斯市场，但是大多数的
that Western companies are leaving the Russian market,
去发展，
but the Chinese market will stay, they will develop, and they will fill in the niches, they will draw commercial offers,
而且很多俄罗斯的企业对于发展
and it will give them
做的这
an additional momentum. I see Russian companies coming in,
当然对于
and I see Russian companies being optimistic
高水平的贸易发展，更多的人员交
to see Chinese companies as their potential partners.
疫情、新冠肺炎疫情，
I see the interest, the mutual interest in Russian and Chinese entrepreneurs.
国的企业家，大家希
I
望
guess it will help to restore
大家来中，
Chinese
但是很多人
and Russian supply chains.
这个
I guess that we will have
隔离期，
a legal framework that will ensure the stability
前中国
for
的
these relations.
正在发生，
I hope that we can hold an event in China and maybe meet in person
防疫政策也有
to have a more substantial talk on that.
病毒的变化，那么中国，
China has their own peculiarities in the legal framework
所以我建议大家
and the COVID policies, but these policies are now improving, and
看一
it allows more and more openings. Therefore, I guess next year that China will be open for attendance, and you will be able to visit different corporations. You will be able to meet face to face
政府的换届，
with public figures.
也有更多的理由。
I guess we will hold events
天之后，
to ensure that.
中俄之间的各领域的合
We expect huge touristic flows.
会迎来一个新的发展。
We are convinced
这其中，
that every aspect of life
共和国与中国，
will turn out interesting for Russia.
这也是我第一次来到乌法，但是我对于
Of course,
和巴什基尔托斯坦，
it's my first time in Ufa
这里是俄罗斯
and in Bashkortostan, unfortunately, but I am impressed
托斯坦也一直积极
by this land. I am impressed by the economic level of this region.
致辞当中，我们大家也看到，中国在这些年一直是巴什科尔托斯坦贸易的第一大伙伴。
Recently,
双方的贸易
I see that
持续的增长。
Bashkortostan has been
那巴什科尔托斯坦还与中国很多地
actively working with China
发展合作，
directly.
江西省
I can feel it.
等等。另外，巴什科尔
I
的多元化的
see that
工业体系和良
Chinese provinces are ready to cooperate,
的
and I'm glad that
对于
our countries are have pluralistic opportunities in cooperation, and they have a wide range of different businesses and aspects to work in.
这种合作、经济合作，还有
I want to mention the concept One Belt, One Way, which
贸促会
is a step forward
是中
towards
最为悠久、
development of our cooperation.
规模最大的全国性贸易投资促进机构
It's important
中国贸促会英文的缩写 CCPIT 成立于
for us to be an organization that views cooperation with Russia as
中国贸促会
a key
致力
aspect.
帮助
This year, our
和国外企业建立合作纽带
organization is 20 years old,
的经贸合作，
and I guess we have to keep building bridges
所有的省
between
和
countries that are included and are not yet included in the SCO.
地方贸促机构有
Our
12.2
organization functions in all provinces of China. We have over 900 organizations.
立了393个多双边，
It functions in various
同时
cities and states.
贸促会也是上海合作组织
Globally, we have 400 centers of cooperation
实业家委员
which you can reach out to
各国
to build cooperation with Chinese enterprises.
密切的合作。中国贸促会驻俄罗斯代表处
We have close
在设在
contacts with alike organizations.
年的时间了，长期以来，我们一直与俄罗斯工商界保持着紧密的合作，致力于促成中俄企业
Russia
高效对接。同时，我们也在
is our 30-year-long partner.
各联邦主体与中国各省份、各地方发展合作。所以，未来
We
代表处
can feel their contribution
科尔托斯坦之
to our economy.
交往，助力
And I know that there are people that contributed to that
更加密切
significantly.
我的合作。最后，我也想在
I wish
巴什科尔托斯坦共和国组织
that we would use the potential of the Chinese
第15周
People Republic of China and the Russian Federation.
促进
I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this forum.
企业、工商界之间的合作。
For 15 years, UFA
我们的论坛越办
has had the infrastructure for such global events and dialogues and lead the world to a better time.
Thank you very much for your warm invitation for us to all visit China. In fact, that sounds like a very good option. Hopefully that'll be our next chance to take a vacation there. But I'd like to also make one quick remark. One thing that was said that was really the key to this is not only do China and Russia, are they able to sort of fill each other's gaps, but it's amazing the speed at which both Russians can react to problems and Chinese businesses can create solutions. Because it was just a few months ago that the Western, especially automotive industry, had to pretty much completely leave Russia, leaving one particular factory around Moscow that's very famous vacant. Within a few weeks of the beginning of the special military operation, they had already revealed that the Moskvich car, which was very famous during the Soviet Union, would be coming back. And as of my words right now, they're already on the production line and have been, I think, for 2 or 3 months. That's an incredible speed, and I think that's the perfect example of what we need. And not just because it's cars, but because that factory always produced these strange, small, French cars designed for some sort of European logic that doesn't exist in a big country full of big people. So I'd just like to thank our Chinese partners here for helping us build a much better system of transport. But so one thing that I want to then jump over, Mr. Nazarov, is that from what it seems, as we're talking about Asia, we're talking about Russia, we're talking about the rest of the world, is it really only the Europeans that are suffering from sanctions then? Which seems kind of paradoxical in a way. I mean, they created them.
Mr. Kirby, I wish I agreed with you, but only Europe suffers. Unfortunately, everyone, the whole planet suffers. Europe and other countries. Partly for us, it's a certain challenge, and we're already coping, and we will complete coping with it. It's not quite logical. It leads to some more sophisticated, complex processes. That's why, unfortunately, it influences everyone. I mean it. But I think, yes, the trend is right, that Europe suffers most. And Russian Federation has never said that we will not cooperate with Europe. We have always been open for a dialogue, for cooperation. That's why we continue to remain open. We have our doors open. We continue working with those who wish, who is willing. You're welcome. Going back to Italy, who is also one of the countries which suffers also drastically in the given period. And we are going to have our representative from Italy online, a deputy of Veneto Regional, Stefana Enagamberi. She will tell us about the negative consequences of sanctions for Europe, in particular Italy. Mr. Valdegamberi, Stefana, greetings. Do you buy firewood for €7 as well, as I mentioned? Is it like that?
Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a very big pleasure to see you again, Mr. Nazarov. And what I want to say is that the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is provoking significant effects on the Italian-German production system. The increase in the cost of energy and raw materials is creating the conditions for deindustrialization of Europe. This effect could give a short-term benefit to the US and to emerging countries. But the short-sightedness of European rulers in the sanction policy is creating boomerang effects. The sanctions to Russia are progressively putting industrial production in crisis. The growth rate halted in 2023 and the profit margins have been already reduced. Inflation is even more higher, but these negative effects are not equal for all the Ukraine supporters. The United States is supplying liquid gas to Europe, but under disadvantageous conditions for Europe. For several years, they have criticized the German stock up on cheap gas from Russia. The destruction of Nord Stream is just the culmination of a policy that seeks to keep Russian raw material separate from European technology. It really seems that this conflict
Да, там просто вывели прилавок вашего магазина, Стефана.
We can see your store, Stefana. We have a disruption in connection. We see the price tag of the. Looks like we see the price tag of firewood. Please, Mr. Stefana, turn on the.
Perhaps you should check and see which device is connected. It may have changed for some reason. We can't hear you.
Электричество начали выключать они просто.
Unfortunately, we may have to move on because we can't hear your audio. I'm sorry. Can you maybe do a real quick check and see where the in the settings where the audio is?
Sorry.
There we
Okay.
go. Okay.
Okay, it's okay. Sorry.
No
I
problem.
don't. Oh, thank you. Have you heard my speech before? Not.
Oh, well, not the entirety, of course. Can you go back
Okay.
maybe 2 minutes?
Okay. But now, what I want to say is the price is increasing more and more, and the problem is this production system of Italy and Germany, because overall the progressive this provoke the progressive deindustrialization of Europe, and at the end, I want to say these sanctions are eating Russian or are eating Europe? This is a very real question, because at the end of this situation, if we go in this way, the problem is our industrial system is crashed down, and we depend more and more from abroad, and that is the result I don't want to reach.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd just like to add one little story related to Italy that I think it's important, but let me provide just a real quick bit of context, okay? Maybe for some of the foreign people here who don't, live inside Russia or live in the Russian media space, you don't know the extent to which they've tried to sort of cancel Russia within Europe. Russian sports athletes not being able to compete, things like, Tchaikovsky's music being banned, not allowing Pushkin's books to be read, so on and so forth. The silliest of which is now a classic throughout all of Russia, that Russian cats can't participate in these cat shows, which is very silly. So given this context of Russophobic madness, I have to say that I'm very happy to talk to someone from Italy, because for the very first time since the special military operation began, there was a protest in Italy, I believe around Milan, that was pro-Russian, Italian-Russian relations, and the government allowed it, and it wasn't broken up. So do you think that might be a sign of hope?
We have to consider one thing. First of all, we have to distinguish Italian people from government. Most Italian people is friendly with Russia and don't understand, despite this big propaganda we receive in only one way. We have information totally wrong about the real situation, what is really happening. But despite that, Italian people don't trust to the government, and what you say, what is said by the TV, newspaper, and so on is totally different. Totally different from what really think Italian people. We have to distinguish this thing. But our decisions are not taken by Italian government, but taken from abroad. We receive the indication what to have to do, but is very, very far from the thought of a normal people. Normal people don't realize what really happened, but they don't want to be enemy of Russian people. We are very close to Russia, and but. I realize that what appear from newspaper, from the bigger rulers, in our society is another thing, because politicians go in one way, but the people really go in another way. We are two different things. Everything depends on the communication, the media system. But step by step, people start realizing that it's not true what they heard from the official media, and I think, and so to keep calm the people, our government are increasing the debt, the public debt, give them subsidies to the people more and more to keep calm the people, because the price for energy price, for example, increased by 6 times, 7 times, and every. And overall, for the production system, is a big problem. It's a very big problem. And what I'm afraid that in the next time we are destroying our production system because of this totally wrong choice at international level. That they don't respond to the interest of our country, but respond only to the interest of others.
Thank you very much. As an American, I can relate. You know, in the 1990s, when the Cold War ended, we all thought we were going to live in a great era of peace and prosperity. And then we got about 4 or 5 wars that no one asked for, and pretty much everyone voted against. But anyways, that's a story for another day. The question is, though, Mr. Nazarov, in the context of what's happening now, how can we, getting around these sanctions, getting around these rules, getting around this anti-populist mood in European politics, how can we get around all that and still create good economic connections with Russia and beyond?
Господин Керби, хотел бы сказать, что не обязательно следовать
Mr. Kirby, I would like to say that you don't have to do anything against the will of your nation. There is a political will, and there are some independent managers in the country, and there are politicians that maintain interests of their nation. And if there are such politicians, we will be happy to communicate with them, and we do communicate with them. Oftentimes, we have to find more complicated chains, use mediator states for supply of products or technologies. Yet, we have examples when an NATO state is working with the Russian Federation, because the head of the state maintains the interest of their own nation more than interest of the NATO. It means that the head of the state is interested in the development of their own nation, their own people. Today we have a representative of the Turkish company, Aykut Bayceoğlu, and he is a big advocate of his country.
Öncelikle çok teşekkür ederim.
First of all, I would like to express the gratitude for giving the floor to me. I'm happy to be at this significant event. I'm grateful to the government of the Republic of Bashkortostan for the high level of organization at this forum. Besides, I would like to express my gratitude to Marat Ansakuzhin, the representative of Bashkortostan in Turkey, for his open attitude to the Turkish Republic. Before I came here, it was hard for me to assess what's going on in Russia. And now I see it with my own eyes. I understand that we are in a very comfortable situation. The government of Bashkortostan does a lot of work to attract business here. It's a big support for us, a big chance, and we have to use this unique historical situation to create a long-term production processes, and we believe that it's possible. I'm very grateful for doing this much for the business to come here.
Thank you very much. Very short and sweet, which I always appreciate as a moderator. You know, just even thinking about that, Turkey has had this very sort of unique position where In NATO, it's been a lot more independent than a lot of the other NATO countries. In terms of its attempts to sort of participate in the Euro integration, it's definitely been a bit of an exception. But one country that's really stuck to sort of abide by the rules is Germany. And one thing that I have to say, though, about Germany in the context of Russia, which is very important, we have to remember, in the 19th century, the Tsars, well, they were still around, were absolutely certain, because they had so many familial ties with those in Prussia and the new forming German nation, that there would never be a problem with Germany, that they would sort of have the western part and central part of the European continent, Russia would have the eastern part, and everyone would be happy. Well, that certainly didn't happen, because Germany went against Russia in World War I, World War II. During the Cold War, Germany was, of course, split, but the biggest part of it turned into a big American army base. And now, up to this very point, the Germans are kind of being forced against Russia, against their will, by Washington. So here's the big question for Germany. How is Germany getting any benefit out of all of this? And it seems like for the last 100 years, they've been really making a mistake by constantly pitting themselves against Russia, by their own will or not, you know.
Господин Керби, я
Mr. Kirby,
согласен, и
I agree with you completely.
чуть-чуть попозже вернуться вот к этой
And I will go back to this topic a little later, speaking about cooperation between Russia and Germany, because we have colleagues there,
некоторую вставку,
entrepreneurs there. I would like to make a little insertions, little remark here.
позицию
I would like to define our position, the position of the Russian Federation. The Ministry of Internal Affairs,
как
Foreign Affairs,
орган, и сейчас подключен
is establishing an authority. And now we have the Director of Information and Press Department
Мария Владимировна.
of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Marina Zakharova. Thank you very much for joining our discussion today.
Разгорелась полемика.
Today we are
Внимание с нами
passionately discussing the cooperation with Germany, if they are ready
советские участники
to maintain the communication.
сотрудничества с Россией.
And we know that Germany sees interest in cooperation with Germany, and the European Parliament
Итальянского парламента
confirmed that they regret imposing sanctions, and they claim that the prices for products are rising.
обсуждения.
We are just in the middle of the conversation.
Добрый день.
Good afternoon.
Благодарю за Слышно?
I'm grateful for inviting me here. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you well. Hello.
Благодарю за приглашение выступить на
I'm grateful for the invitation.
посвященном деловой активности в контексте
I'm ready to talk about the cooperation under this
говорим каждый день и говорили, кстати, раньше.
intensive
Прогнозы давали, и все эти прогнозы сбылись.
intense situation. We made predictions, and these predictions came true.
До партнеров, до широкой общественности
We
на всех уровнях.
were spreading the word about the sanctions,
Правом мы
and we explained them according to
меры
the international legislation, and we think that these sanctions are not legal, and we think they are not justified. Sanctions can be introduced only if there is a threat to the United Nations.
Вы понимаете,
You were speaking about Germany, weren't you?
тому, что
There is no surprise
уже не
that
законодательный
the UN is not a legislative authority anymore
активным Западом международного права.
from the point of view of the West and the Western legislation. What is happening inside Germany? I couldn't believe it when I read about it.
Проверяю,
I double-check all the information I get.
попадает, что
But
мы,
to my surprise,
правда, с другой стороны, самое
we live in the post-truth era.
не поверила, но я услышала,
I couldn't believe it,
видела видео,
but I saw a video,
перевод, и мне
I saw translation, and they confirmed that it's the right translation. The Minister of Justice of Germany claimed that one of the tasks of her government and of her ministry
в отмене презумпции.
is to cancel
Мы
the
где вообще живем? Вы можете представить, что
presumption of innocence.
ведущая европейская страна, кстати,
That's impossible to believe
восприятие ФРГ всегда
that such a claim has been made. We always viewed Germany as an
черта
legally obeying state.
культуры, как
We considered it as a part of the national mentality,
власть,
but the executive authority is discussing the ability, the opportunity, the situation. They don't respond to the social situation. They just defined it as their mission to cancel the presumption of innocence. They are developing this idea. It wasn't a mistake. She said, as the Minister of Justice, that they don't have to prove that the person is guilty, but the person should prove that they're innocent. And how can we impose any international law when a country like that, when an authority like that claims that their mission is to publicly kill their legislation? I'm not a lawyer, but at school I studied all the legislative studies. It's fundamental. It's fundamental. So all these economic restrictions they have nothing to do with economy. It's blackmailing a country. It's a political punishment for our independent international policy. Does it only our business? No. This pressure measure affects the entire globe if something is not according to the position of West collaboration of states. Iran has been suffering from sanctions for 40 years. Iran had things changing. New government came. They changed their legislation. They were trying to build relations with different countries from scratch. They were solving their everyday issues related to the nuclear security, but they were never relieved from sanctions. Why does Cuba have to suffer from sanctions? At least Russia gets some explanations, but what about Cuba? You can't even tell why Cuba got sanctions. Ask France, ask other countries, why do they impose sanctions on Cuba? Why does America impose sanctions on this state? They never know, they will never tell you. Just because they don't have democracy. Yeah, we had a democracy summit and we realized that we have very few countries where democracy can be found. I guess that the US is the only exception. The summit decided that Hungary has wrong democracy from the point of view of the United States. China also has issues because Canada and the US are leading a technological war against China. They don't call it sanctions, but they impose various kinds of restrictions. From the political point of view, these are sanctions.
Именно в отношении Китая впервые. Помните?
Do you remember the first such kind of policy against China?
Первые санкционные списки.
Do you remember the
Потом они обрастали уже экономическими.
The events that took place in China 30 years ago? It was the first reason for America and Canada to impose sanctions on China.
Надо смотреть на
However,
как все это все воспринимают.
We need to analyze the results. We need to analyze effects on Cuba, Iran, and China. Did they bear losses? Yeah, they did.
Оказались в каких-то вопросах глобальных положении, поскольку
to a certain extent, China, for example, got benefits from this kind of situation because the US also suffered from the sanctions that they imposed, especially in terms of informational security. These sanctions look like kicking a ball into their own net. As one great poet once said that peasant will always have the job to do. So it's early to make any final conclusions for the European countries.
Долгие десятилетия поставлял в европейские
For years,
столицы то, на чем они топились,
European capitals had one supplier who ensured them with the energy resources.
положение Европейского Союза,
But due to the restrictions,
настроение.
the European countries don't have that much of a Christmas vibe because the prices for the electricity and heating are rising enormously.
Уже это все сделал.
But what is the reason? Who is at guilt? Is it Moscow? Did they do something? Did they sign any Caesar acts or whatever?
Клеопатры.
Or Cleopatra Act? No, they didn't.
Китай, который перебил
Maybe
какими-то страшными действиями.
was China the reason? Maybe they did something, and the North Korea did something, who is taking their revenge for year-long suffering. Maybe this was Cuba, this was Iran. No, and this
С Европейским Союзом
is something that European countries face.
Какое-то время занимает облететь, долететь там время.
They are guilty in their own problems. They are self-sabotaging themselves.
В свою очередь, наша страна обеспечена энергоресурсами, продовольствием.
Yet our country is provided with all the energy resources and food. The company is coping with all the challenges. They diversify the international relations. And they disrupt connections with the unfriendly states and strengthening their connections with other states.
Нормальная реакция живого организма.
And I think it's a healthy response in a market economy. As far as I know, we are heading towards the market economy, but something that they do is against all the principles of the market economy. Market can be managed only according to the market laws. There are no laws on the market. Otherwise, it's not a market economy, but something else. I don't know if it's for better or for worse, but it's not the market economy.
Российские меры, шаги по
The Russian measures
показывает жизнь являются более либеральными.
Undertaken are more liberal than the tyrant policy of Brussels and Washington,
конкурентной борьбы.
because they are supporting non-competitive relations.
Беларусь, ЕАЭС, СНГ, наращивается межрегиональное взаимодействие на пространстве БРИКС.
Cooperation between regions and countries as part of CO and BRICS. We are building ties with Latin America, where the majority of population of the earth lives. Those people have answered all the questions, whether they will join in with sanctions or not, with those Western nightmare, let's put it this way. They have already expressed everything. The pressure was huge. They were trying to change the regimes, and they managed. They were poisoning, I mean, information-wise, the leaders of those countries who wouldn't yield. They just said, we're for peace. We want the conflict to end. So, okay, it's up for you to resolve, but we will not do suicide, self-suicide, because someone simply has a wish. And another, what is more important, we visited Africa and Asia lately. I've heard it myself, not a retelling, not some recording. Well, with all our respect, but we are guided by the historical experience. You may say many things, you may promote anything. We are looking at 100 years back, before the 21st century. And it's this experience which is decisive. That's what we're guided by when we choose our path, our route. And we see that gradually in the past several hundred years, that Russian policy has been consecutive and integral, and we understand that you are a reliable partner. Some say it's all words, it's ideology, it's not working. Let's do some one-time actions. Let's be guided quickly. This was our liberal thought. Imposed from outside, yes, it works in the short-term perspective, for short-term profit. But it doesn't work. In critical situations, it doesn't work too. And the attitude of the United States to Venezuela, I think, is just a very loud example of confirmation of my words. Actually, I didn't mention sanctions against Venezuela. There has been so many different things. It's hard to withstand. And now everyone gathers fruit, everyone its own fruit. That's why we are improving cooperation with the East, at the municipal levels, brother and sister cities. The policy of collective West promotes instability in the food market. We have an alerting situation when needy countries face a growth of prices, or they are completely cut from the Russian food. Manufacturers and exporters have difficulties in terms of transactions and logistics because of super high insurance fares, and we are kept being blamed for starting the food crisis, saying nothing that the main beneficiary from the growth of prices for the food is the largest corporations which trade agricultural product. We're talking about a treason. We're talking about an agreement, just a whole series of agreements, secret agreements of consumers of our resources with the top limit for our energy, for our power. Then there is a secret agreement between the Western companies which earn from a situation with corn. Well, this will be, we will do some follow-up work later, and everyone, all the guilty parties will be punished. And thank you very much for this. I shared some information. Marina, thank you very much for participating in the discussion. Dear colleagues, let's continue. Tim, I will get back to the Russian and German relations. And given that Maria Zakharova confirmed what we have talked about, that many actions which occur this year, mainly, they are strange, and it's self-shooting, so to say, self-suicide. And relations between Russia and Germany have always been mutually beneficial because it was stable, has always been very stable for dozens of years. And now, when this turbulence appeared for Europe in the first place, for Germany, we see that the leaders of Germany already talking that something has to be done. Until this opinion doesn't prevail yet, but we can hear it very well. Today, we have online Stefan Keuter, the deputy Bundestag MP, and he can confirm, he can share what kind of a mood the Bundestag has, how people feel. Mr. Keuter, Stefan, can you hear us?
Yes, perfectly. Can you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we do. We hear you.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Great. So yeah, thank you very much for your invitation. It's great to be with you, even if it's online. I hope we will be able in the future to meet personally again. Well, let me talk about the sanctions. Let me talk what happened in Ukraine. The situation in Ukraine is a proof that diplomacy failed. This is a blame and the Western world is blaming this on Russia, but there are always two sides of a medal. The other side of the medal is declared by the words of our former Chancellor, Mrs. Angela Merkel, who gave an interview to the Spiegel magazine. It's called the Mirror. It's a German news magazine, one of the biggest ones. And she said the Donbas conflict was never supposed to be solved in a peaceful way. The Minsk process and the negotiations there were just there to buy time for Ukraine to gear it up. And to add the words of the military analyst Scott Ritter, he said, war was the only option that was contemplated. And yes, it was true that Putin had to realize shortly that trust in the West, trust in negotiations, and trust in the made promises were obviously a mistake. And this is true. And I was wondering how fast these sanctions were coming. This is not made by one or another day. So the United States, parts of the Western world, and most of the countries in the European Union and the NATO decided to put sanctions into action. And this normally takes weeks and months to get this, the whole process running. But this was nearly overnight. So this must have been prepared for months and years. And this shows that the relationship between Russia and the Western world is not as good as we all thought it is. Even during the times of Cold War, we always got reliable energy from Russia, and we always did trade together. And this made the world a little bit more peaceful. And I'm really afraid that this is not the case right now. And well, we had elections September last year here in Germany, and the government, Mrs. Merkel gave up, and her party, and there was a new government coming. It moved to the left, and the Green Party always was involved into government. And this is a big problem. They do politics by ideology and not by common sense, you know. They decided to step out of coal energy, coal power stations, step out of nuclear power stations. They just want to transfer the energy market to solar and wind energy, and this doesn't work, you know. Now, the Nord Stream pipelines, the heart of the German energy supply, were blown up, and I'm really afraid that nearly nobody of the other parties in Germany is really interested in finding out who it was and to take actions against this, you know. And I think it is in the interest of the Green Party here in Germany that we don't have the gas supply. They want to have alternative energies, but this cannot solve the problems of a society like Germany. We need the cheap, the good Russian energy, the good Russian gas. In the past, the wealth of Germany was based on receiving cheap energy from Russia, and this was a mutual beneficiary connections between our countries. And they say the gas storages in Germany are full, and we have enough gas to get over the winter. But now the cold time of the year is coming, and they're using roughly 1% of the gas storages in Germany every day. So you can just easily calculate if the winter stays as cold as it's right now. It was minus 9 degrees Celsius when I got up this morning here in Berlin. We are running out of gas, and it will get dark and cold in Germany. But I hope that people wake up and realize that this is not the future. And with politicians like this, the left-wing politics and the green politicians, it doesn't work. There's no future. I'm in the opposition right now in Germany, but we are hoping that more and more people realize that we need to change in politics, that we get stronger, and that we can build a good relationship between our countries, Russia and Germany again. And this is personally my wish for the future. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. Very succinct and very to the point. Germany is in definitely a rough position, but again, it's in a very rough position for no logical reason. But anyways, moving on from the macro to the more focused, the smaller level. Now, if we think about things in terms of the smaller businesses, of course people want to participate. They want to work with Russia and interact. They don't want to deal with these sanctions. No businessman wants to live in a world where they're surrounded by a million different restrictions. But the question is, how do they get around it? Because as it stands now, even simple things like sending things to Russia is very difficult. I have a new American driver's license in some sort of void somewhere because they can't get it to me. It is very difficult to fly here, as many of you may have just found out. It is also extremely difficult to transfer any sum of money to Russia that's maybe more than $10. There are so many limitations. So the question is, Mr. Nazarov, how can small and medium businesses, as things stand today, work with Russia, despite things becoming so complicated?
Господин Керби, еще раз хотел сказать о том, что
Mr. Kirby, I would like to say again that Russia and Bashkortostan do whatever they can to maintain cooperation with all their partners despite of the circumstances. We want to improve the business climate and the investment climate.
высказывание весной Владимир
You may remember that Vladimir Putin said in spring
западные компании уходить из
about some companies leaving Russia that on the counterpart
комфортно и еще более
we will have even more favorable conditions in the territory of Russia for the international companies,
чтобы чувствовали, что
for those who stay, because they should
с Россией надо работать.
feel that they did the right thing when they stayed.
Именно к этому
And Bashkortostan is maintaining this strategy. We are forming the most favorable investment climate. We are in the top 5 among Russian regions for the level of the investment climate. And the International Business Week is another confirmation that we are welcoming any international partner, any international entrepreneur.
которые бы хотели сотрудничать с Россией.
If you want to cooperate with Russia and Bashkortostan, you can feel free.
Максимальные преференции.
We will provide all the preferences and all the privileges for them. We have a special economic zone. We have tacit territories of advanced economic and social development.
Быстрыми темпами инфраструктуру
We are creating
резидентов, а резидент
the infrastructure in leaps. And we create all the conditions for companies to establish their factories. We have first factories already running in the Republic of Bashkortostan. It doesn't matter if you have a small, a medium-sized or large business. We have the most faithful and welcoming attitude to anyone.
себя хвалила, мы просто спросили у тебя.
I want to walk the talk and give the floor to the president of associations of Italian entrepreneurs in Russia, Vittorio Torrembini, the president of GIM Unimpresa. I am encouraging him to tell how he views his work here. Thank you very much, dear Mr. Nazarov, for giving me this opportunity to speak. I would like to confirm that Italians work very well, and we've been working for a long time. We were founders, we were pioneers in investing here, and we worked a lot in Bashkortostan. We weren't able to make large investments yet, but we go on. We have 100 companies from Italy in Russia with their own production here. I guess that in cooperation with Italian press, we avoid communicating with them. We avoid communicating with some public authorities. Because our companies were heroes before February 2022, but next day we turned into enemies. So you can see the situation here. We used to be honored, we used to be ones who were developing Italian economy, we were developing good relations with Russia for 30 years, but in one day we turned into the enemies of the nation. We are not enemies. We just found the way for us. We are people who want to develop healthy relations. We are people who want to develop the economy of our company, of our country. I want to discuss a little bit who influences the situation. This kind of tornado. Everybody influences. Russia influences. And who loses? Everyone loses in this kind of situation. Russia, Europe, China, Asia. The level of growth is only 2%, and that's not enough. Somebody pays attention to Turkey, for example, who are developing their economy, but anyway, this kind of situation is not favorable for everyone. But if we apply minimal rules to this game of economy and legislation and international laws, if we do things like that, everyone will lose at the end. And it will be hard to restore the relations. We need to start off light with culture and tourism. And I guess events like the International Business Week will be step one in this restoration. I don't think that being an Italian entrepreneur, large, small, or big, will be able to change the situation caused by the Italian government. But being entrepreneurs, we can launch the communication with Mr. Nazarov, with our colleagues in Bashkortostan, Lipetsk, Voronezh. We will start restoring the diplomatic relations between our states. If the crisis in Ukraine is over next year and the crisis in Taiwan starts, our companies in China, will they have to hide? No, we need to stop this avalanche, this disruption. This disruption that affected what we've been building over the years. So thank you for holding this event. I think it's a significant thing to do today. Even despite of the fact that we have to hide, we will go on working.
Thank you very much for those words of optimism. I hope that you are correct. That sounds very good. Now, one situation that is not so optimistic is my next question for you, Mr. Nazarov, because for my entire lifetime, Iran has been under sanctions. And I'm not that young, if you guys haven't noticed. That's a long time that the Iranians have had to live without SWIFT and various other lovely aspects of globalism. Worst case scenario, what if Russia has to live like Iran has been living? Do you think that there's any possibility of that happening, of them finding some way to sort of convince the world to truly isolate Russia?
Mr. Kirby, I would like to mention again that the worst-case scenario was assumed in early 2022. In April, a lot of supporters of the Russian isolation expected a short war. But fortunately, they didn't succeed. Earlier today, I mentioned that the expectations were as follows, that the Russian economy will shut down. But on the contrary, the income of Russian budget rose by 10%. Bashkortostan budget rose by 18%. Why? Because when a company with international owners functions in Russia, earns profit, we don't mind. This profit goes to the associated countries. But when these companies are substituted by Russian companies, these Russian companies bring the profit to Russia. Does it make sense? If for some reasons, Russian companies failed in comparison to international companies, now this situation is no longer valid because Russian companies improve their quality and substitute international companies on the market. So we strengthen ourselves. For 10 years,
Нас
We've been
сказали, будьте открытыми, открывайте,
we've been
идти на ваш рынок без ограничений. Мы хотим у вас торговать, производить, покупать. В итоге
we've been trying to enter international union, and they forced us to be more flexible. They convinced us
единственное, что
to
мир передумал,
open our
потому что
borders.
наказать Российскую Федерацию.
And when we are finally open, they decided to punish us for this kind of behavior.
Я уверен,
We didn't shut down, the economy didn't shut down, and I guess that all the Russians are convinced that we will
более сильными.
leave this crisis, that we'll come out of this crisis even stronger.
Показательно, смотрите, 40 лет
For 40 years,
Иран.
Iran has been blocked by sanctions.
При этом посмотрите, сколько
But at the same time, we see how many high-quality, competitive goods are produced by Iran.
теперь уже как бы с удовольствием открываемся с Ираном.
Today, we are happy to open up to Iran. We get their market, they get ours. It's a large country.
Ну, и Ирану, и нам
And I guess
этим не
that it's mutually beneficial.
имеет отношение к
But it has nothing to do with the mutual benefits when it comes to Europe.
в направлении открытости.
Of course, I'm convinced that it's better to move towards openness and mutual profitability. And UFA dialogue
Изменить
is
европейского
an event to convince
мирового, ну, глобального
sanction supporters otherwise.
Тех западных стран, которые стоят
We want to convince these daredevils that it's more beneficial for them to participate in this dialogue. That's why we invited an Iranian representative to share
и работают.
how their businesses are functioning under sanctions for decades.
Махти
Today we have Mahdi Izaptur.
вниматель.
He is an entrepreneur from Iran. How do you assess the situation
Хуже для Ирана, чем уже
in Iran? Do you think that situation can't get any worse? What are the prospects of cooperation with Russia?
в мировой экономике.
How do you view the development of the world economy?
Здравствуйте, дорогие
Good afternoon, dear friends.
господи.
Mr. Nazarov,
Я хочу
I would like to express my gratitude as the manager of this meeting.
но, к сожалению,
Unfortunately,
переводчик персидского
here the Persian
я
interpreter is not available here. I love speaking Persian,
но я тоже
but
русский
I love Russian language too.
хорошо не могу говорить.
Unfortunately, my Russian isn't perfect.
Предложением
If you don't get what I'm saying, I am really sorry for that.
немножко я хочу говорить на русском языке.
I would like to speak a little bit in Russian.
Санкции в Иране,
Sanctions in Iran
я думаю,
have been imposed a long time ago,
но
around 40 years ago.
очень трудно для страны Ирана.
These sanctions
Но я
created a difficult situation in my country, but I believe that the sanctions,
хорошо для
on the other hand, will turn out favorable for our state. We use it, it encourages us to work harder,
хорошо для Ирана.
and the results are a natural consequence of that.
Россия, я,
Sanctions for Russia
да, очень хорошо будет,
will also influence positively,
но
thanks God.
что Америка,
I believe that the United States,
Азия,
the Asian countries,
она очень сильная и проблема для Америки.
I guess that strong countries in Asia are a problem for the United States. I mean China, I mean Russia and Iran.
Россия и Украина, война,
The war between Russia and Ukraine,
Украина и Россия. Россия сначала, я думаю, что он думает, это очень
in
большой.
the first place, I think that it's a problem for Russia.
Они знают, что это тоже очень хорошо.
But on the other hand, it has certain effects.
Война.
And you can turn these effects into your favor. Taking the situation between China and Taiwan, there also a war growing between them. But the Iranian authorities didn't want to turn the nation against the state. But it didn't turn out the right way. The states love their nations and respect their nations. And unfortunately, they are not capable of doing anything with that. We know that America is not the only country in the world. And dollars and euros are not the only currency in the world. As far as we know, there are other currencies, other money, other states in the world. We can exchange money, our own currencies among us. The Iranian leader, Imam Khamenei, said that the United States is like an ice. It's ice. If you push hard enough, it will turn out into water. It's an aphorism, an idiom that we know, and we can use it. And I don't mean American nation. They are good people. I mean the government of America. If the American state is against us, we can use the knowledge of this aphorism. Unfortunately, the Iranian state used to want to build strong relations with the United States. The Iranian leader thought that it was impossible. The friendship between Iran and the United States is impossible. Why is that? Because the United States didn't want to build friendly relations. They wanted only money. They wanted to fulfill their own interests. They want to use Iran.
That is why we think that we can stand on our own feet. We can do our business. Between Russia and Iran, thank God, the relations are going well. If I remember, about 2 months ago, there was a visit to Tehran in the city of Qum, and there was an assembly arranged between businessmen of Russia and Iran. The relations are very good. So I think that between Russia and Iran, we can see very good trade. Thank you so much for giving me the floor and time. Sorry for my Russian. Apologies. I hope you understood me.
The main thing is to try. I've been here 15 years and I still have a really rough accent. Just got to keep practicing. But thank you very much. I understood everything, but then again, I'm a foreigner, so maybe I'm used to it. But anyways, I'd just like to say one thing in closing. As an American who is in the media, writes a lot about politics here in Russia, one of the main questions that I think is sort of the overarching question of what we're discussing today from the Western side is, why are they doing this? Why is the Western leadership doing something so self-destructive to itself? And the problem with that is it's an answer that I can express to you that I know the answer to it, but it's so difficult to put into words. But the best I can do is this. Recently, I believe one of the European leaders, I think it was Scholz in Germany, sort of said that Europe was civilization and the rest of the world was a jungle. And this is in the 21st century, that this person, despite all of their, in theory, tolerant beliefs and anti-racism, this, that, and the other, after all these centuries, this person still has the same belief that he's one of the glorious Romans and the rest of the world is filled with barbarians. And I think that that Roman or colonial or, I don't know, fascistic view of people outside of Europe, within leadership of Europe, who's very removed from its own people, is the real problem. We're living in very delusional times. Look at the, if we were talking to people about Russia, I always say, what's been the biggest problem in Russia over the last, so many years? It's the Ukrainian situation, because people are dying there. There's also issues with the economy, pension reform, so on and so forth. If you ask the average American what the problems are, they're going to talk about taxes and work and their job and this, that, and the other. But when we talk to the elites about what's the problem, it's things to do with gender. It's things to do with people using the proper pronouns to talk to a man in a dress. And that's the problem. In some ways, we here have to think of a way to convince delusional people out of their delusion. That is a very substantial challenge because as of today, those delusional people still have Rolexes on their wrists and Bentleys in the driveway. But when you live in complete delusion, those Bentleys won't be there forever. That's at least my way of looking at things. And let's let the Prime Minister of the government of Bashkortostan, Andrei Nazarov, please give the final word here. Excuse me, guys, I was sick for the last 2 weeks, so my voice is kind of cracking out here at the end. Andrei, please give us the final words, and thank you for having us all here and for organizing this. Excuse me for my vocal cords.
Tim, I would like to, for such an emotional conclusion, yes, you're a journalist, right? Yes, exactly so. I've seen a lot as a journalist. I would like to say that the paradox today of the situation today is that answering your question, that a rhetorical question, right, an open question, which Mr. Kirby just formulated, why that is done, to whom benefit is this, what's the reason, of course, the growing independence of Russia, foreign policy, some other processes, stabilization, when, for example, in Russian Federation, Russia did not apologize, didn't allow to hang the leader of Syria, just like the leader of Iraq was executed through hanging. There are a lot of things like that, and first, a temporary citizenship was given, and then permanent to one of the officer of special services of the United States. It means that our leader, Vladimir Putin, makes independent decisions. And of course, that irritates some people, those who want to orchestrate the world. And it seemed that Russia and the processes began. Some people think that someone gives an opportunity of Ukraine to become a full-fledged member of the European Union and to have some benefits, and the population will profit from that. There are a lot of examples of like kind. I will mention just one. Moldova, for example. Working with Moldova, we analyzed when, at a certain point, Russia left Moldova due to various circumstances. Nobody else came there. Seemingly, Russia left. There is space, investment for business, money, or whatever, nobody came. Same with Ukraine. They will just use and they will dump Ukraine. For us, they are brothers and sisters. Through this pain, we cooperate, we work to live in a single family. We need each other. Europe doesn't need them. America doesn't need them. That's just a lever. That's just a tool of pressure. They don't care about people of Ukraine. They don't care about Moldova. This is to irritate Russia, to make Russia worse. And the paradox that we, surviving through this problem, we're becoming stronger. We begin to manufacture goods which we haven't manufactured before. We get more income because it's our factories producing it, not someone else. By doing so, through this complexity, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And also, I would like to say that among sober people, I have never met anyone who would say that sanctions is right, that sanctions improves economy, business, makes global world better. And in television we hear that, but I have never seen. Yes, I agree. In our today's discussion, everyone understands that it's bad, it's not advantageous, it's not profitable, not beneficial. It upsets business and population and has a drastic effect. The numbers which I'm giving for Russia and Bashkortostan, these are the indexes of official statistics. We're trying to exit this situation with dignity and with great result. And I repeat, we remain open with no exception, with the European Union, other countries, and we have done even more. We have turned eastwards, and we see some points of attraction there opening.
I am convinced that we can make use out of it, both for us and for the countries where we want to enter. Our today's discussion is another step towards the moment when we reach the admission of the idea that the sanctions negatively affect everybody and they must be cancelled. We will walk towards that step by step because, for example, when you cure a disease, you also do it step by step. So we will be moving towards solving this issue. We suggest continue using the infrastructure of Bashkortostan and Ufa for the international cooperation and international events. The International Business Week Ufa Dialogue held today under the International Business Week are directed to stabilize the economic situation both nationally and globally. Next year, as I said, I offer meeting again to celebrate, so to say, the anniversary of the Russian sanctions. And we will be joined by the European Parliament MP, Thierry Mariani, who confirmed his participation in this meeting. I guess we will assess the damage caused by the sanctions. We will find another evidence that we should leave this problem behind and reduce the damages. The earlier we realize that, the easier this communication will go. Maybe some figures are not ready to the political independence, but some people capable of logic faculty will revise their attitude and support the cancellation of anti-Russian sanctions. Thank you very much, dear participants. Ufa is always here for you, and I hope the International Business Week will have a positive contribution to your lives too. Thank you, Mr. Kirby.